everybody, and welcome to the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast. I am Bill, the company's expert. And in this episode, we are talking about how to do public speaking like a boss. This is actually the second episode in this little mini-series where we talk about public speaking. It's a little mini-series of 2 episodes, and this is part 2 of 2. In the last episode, I was talking about the content of what to say when you're doing public speaking. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about how to say it. I'm going to be giving some recommendations on how to actually deliver your speech when you're doing public speaking, okay? When you're talking in front of a group. And like I said on the last episode, this is directly related to your career because public speaking skills are very valuable, especially if you're trying to climb the ladder and put yourself forward for more senior roles where a lot of advanced soft skills are a requirement. And public speaking skills are one of those soft skills. So let's get into the techniques of actually how to deliver a compelling, memorable, and effective speech. Okay, if you're getting up in front of a group and you are trying to convince people, you're trying to communicate information, or you're trying to entertain, or some combination of those 3 things, how do you do it? Well, these are my tips, and these are things that, in my opinion, if you want to improve your public speaking skills, you should be practicing these every chance you get, okay? Now, the number one rule, in my opinion, for delivering a good speech is to not be boring, okay? Remember that golden rule. Don't be boring. You can do a lot of things. You know, there's many people that deliver speeches in different ways, whether it's a keynote address, whether it's, some kind of toolbox meeting at your workplace, or it's in front of people at a social event, okay? You can do it many different ways, but the bottom line is don't be boring. Be interesting, okay? Now, what I'd highly recommend to this end is that you learn to speak extemporaneously, okay? That means off the cuff. You're not reading a speech that has been prepared and typed out word for word, okay? That's not how we deliver a very compelling public speech, okay? Don't get me wrong, that can have its place, but for the vast majority of public speaking you're going to be doing in your professional career, you're going to need to be speaking extemporaneously, okay? So you can have cue cards, you can have notes, but they only provide perhaps topics or points to mention in point form, but they are not written out verbatim, and then you're not going to be reading these things verbatim off a page, word for word, okay? So it's very important, and we get good at this through practice, okay? Speaking extemporaneously is very important. I'm speaking extemporaneously right now, and in fact, this is the take 1 of this little talk I'm giving to you live here for this episode. It's not something I've rehearsed over and over again. I'm just going off a small post-it note with a couple of points written down on it, okay? So speaking extemporaneously is very important. Another thing that is very important is to maintain eye contact, okay? People who give speeches, if they're speaking to a room full of people, not making eye contact with the audience is bad, okay? You should endeavor to make eye contact with every single person in the audience at least once during the course of your speech, okay? That allows you to connect with your audience more. Your audience will find you much more engaging, and they will be much more invested and attentive to what you're saying, okay? In addition to eye contact, I highly recommend that you move. Don't stand in the same spot for the entire address, okay? If you're talking to people, don't just stand there on the same spot for 15 minutes. That is a huge missed opportunity. People tend to tune out because it's boring. Okay, if I had to make a recommendation, it would be for you to move for you to move around your audience. Okay, this is much more engaging, and it adds an extra element of spontaneity and freshness to your speech because you're moving and you're delivering it from different locations. Okay. Thirdly, the volume of your voice. Now, some people speak quietly, some people speak loudly, some people speak somewhere in the middle. Okay. My recommendation would be to do all three, to vary the volume of your voice. Okay, if I was addressing the room, I would talk like this and bring it down very quietly. And then I would ramp it up and talk like this. And then I'm not going to do it now, but I would go out to a yell occasionally. Okay. I have had the pleasure of learning from some of the greats, and they do this. They have a dynamic range. They speak quietly, practically in a whisper. They speak regularly, and then they really raise their voice. Okay? And this serves to, once again, not be boring, be interesting, vary the volume. Okay? Another thing you can do is vary the speed of how you talk. You can talk you can talk very quickly to really explain a point and really get into it like I'm doing now. And then you can have a long pause. Okay, so you vary the speed of what you're saying too. And all of this contributes to that central theme of not being boring. Okay. Now, another point I want to make. Now, this is something that a lot of beginners, a lot of people that are just starting out doing this, they don't have years of experience, they can find this a little intimidating, but I highly recommend that you do this, okay? You work your way up to have the courage to do this because it is very effective, and that is when you're moving around, okay? We talked about not standing on the same spot. You're going to be moving left and right. You might go further away from the audience if you have a sort of space to move, closer to them or further away. But something I would highly recommend is that if you can do this, if you feel comfortable doing it, if you are speaking to an audience, okay, an audience being a collection of people, come out into the audience. Okay, so if you're standing in a classroom or an auditorium or something, don't just stand at the head of the class, at that space where the teacher occupies at the beginning of the class. Okay, and you move left and you move right and you go, to the right side of the class and the left side of the class. If there's some kind of whiteboard or something, you move towards the whiteboard and then you come towards the audience. Go even further and come out into the audience. There is nothing that will engage a group of people more than the speaker coming out into the audience closer to them. Okay, if you really want to connect and you want people to engage and really immerse themselves in what you're saying, that's something that can be extremely effective. Okay. Now, another point I'd like to make is your entrance, how you begin speaking to a group of people. And this can apply if you're speaking to, say, a classroom. It can apply if you're talking to a group of employees, a group of workers. In a business scenario, it could apply to you giving some kind of keynote address or large presentation to a larger crowd of people. Okay. The beginning of the speech is very important, and often it will be up to you to transition the audience, the crowd, from all talking amongst themselves to focusing their attention on you. And there's various ways of doing this. One way that I found particularly effective, and I learned this from a professor that was teaching in university when I was in my early 20s. I took an engineering degree in Canada, and there was a hotshot professor called Dr. Donald Trim. He was an authority in engineering in North America, and he had won all kinds of awards for his teaching ability. And I had the pleasure of being in a couple of his classes. And I learned this from him. I observed him doing it. I applied it myself throughout my career. It's very effective. And the way he would get the attention of, say, a room full of 400 students is he wouldn't raise his voice. He wouldn't flick the lights on and off or anything like that. He would simply stand in front of the class, silent, with his hands folded, his arms folded, in silence, just looking directly at the crowd. And he would maintain eye contact with the audience. And because of where he was standing, it was pretty obvious that he was about to address the room. And he was waiting for silence. And I would not have believed this until I saw it with my own eyes. But what happened, because of his presence, the classroom full of students, like this is hundreds of students, would, over a period of about a minute, would gradually get quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter until they would be silent. And then, and only then, would the professor start speaking. And he would start out in a whisper. And that would maintain the silence, because if anybody started making small talk and having background noise, you wouldn't be able to hear what he's saying. So he'd establish that at the beginning of the class, and then he'd gradually get louder. I thought that was excellent, and I've employed that too. I've employed that at keynotes, and I've employed that in classrooms, and it works like a charm. So that's a little tip for you. If you can do that, I think that's very effective. I know it's very effective if done correctly. Now, another big element of making an effective speech is participation. Getting the audience to participate, okay? Something that I usually employ is when I say something, I get the audience to repeat it. Okay? They repeat it, you say again, get them to do it, say it again, and then they all say it again, then you do it again, right? And get them to say it, and it gets louder each time. It's a way to drill something in. It's a way to maintain engagement, and it's effective. Okay? You can also throw out questions, get people to respond. You can ask pointed questions at individuals, not in the sense that it makes people uncomfortable, but just, to sort of get participation. And you could also elicit answers from the entire room or the entire audience, okay? This is very effective. And people respond very well to this, actually. So that's something that I highly recommend. And basically, all of this goes towards you commanding a room, okay? Whether it's a sort of very receptive crowd or rather a tougher crowd, these techniques will allow you to do that, okay? So these are some practical tips for how to actually deliver the content that you've decided you want to communicate. And how do we get good at this? We practice. It's just that simple, okay? If you have the bravery to start practicing public speaking. Something I've mentioned many times before is the organization Toastmasters International, and they exist to help people become comfortable with public speaking and work on their public speaking skills. So that's something that can be very effective in the beginning. Once you've done that, and you're capable of doing public speaking, you still might be nervous, and it might not be you're not in your comfort zone, but you're capable of doing it. Then I would suggest that you practice this as much as possible in a professional context. So you can volunteer for things at work, you can volunteer for things in your personal life, and work on these skills. And practice makes perfect. Nobody is born with the ability to do public speaking and feel perfectly at ease doing it right out of the gate. That's just not something that humans are hardwired to do. We feel nervous for a reason. It is not a natural situation that we find ourselves in. But with training, we can quickly get very good at this. So we can conquer our self-confidence issues, we can conquer our nerves, and we can become we can get to the point where we're at ease doing this. And it works wonders for our self-confidence and our professionalism. So hopefully that makes sense. Those are some of the tips I would give to people. I've been asked to talk about this, and those would be the sort of the rough guide to what I would say people should work on. And make it your own. You don't have to follow everything I say religiously. There's other things you can do too. But these are hopefully things that will inspire you, techniques and tips that can help you get very good at this. So hopefully that makes sense. Thank you very much for listening. You guys are awesome, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Take care.